Okay, we're back. Hopefully we can finish up this chapter. We're going to start on page 1231, incident levels. And we're going to go through three different levels, and you have to know all three levels. So let's get started. All right, after initial size up has determined the scope of incident, the level can be determined in accordance with the definitions of the local emergency response plan. Know that most incident level models define three levels of response, graduating from level 1, least serious, to level 3, which is the most serious, and this is for hazmat incidents. By defining levels of response and increasing level of involvement, necessary resources can be identified based on the severity of the incident. So let's start off level 1 incident. Within the capability, this is the key part to this, within the capabilities of the fire or emergency service organization or other first responders who have jurisdiction. So this would be your local fire department is within their jurisdiction, is within their scope of practice. It is the least serious, easy to handle level. May pose a serious risk to life or property, but not unusual. Evacuation, if required, is limited to the immediate area of the incident. Examples of level 1 incidents. Need to know this. Could be a small amount of gasoline or diesel fuel spilled from an automobile. This is level 1. Could be a leak from a natural gas line on the consumer side of the meter, which would be the house side of the meter. Broken containers of consumer commodities, such as paint thinners, bleach, swimming pool chemicals. Owner or proprietary are responsible for the cleanup and disposal. So a level 1 within the scope of a fire department, city fire department. A level 2. Level 2, beyond the capabilities of the first responders on scene. Maybe beyond the capabilities of first responders authority having jurisdiction. This may require services of a formal hazmat response team. Properly trained and equipped response teams could be expected to use chemical protective clothing, dye and confine with contaminated areas, perform plugging, patching, and basic leak control activities, sample and test unknown substances, perform various levels of decontamination. Examples of level 2 incidents: spill or leak requiring limited scale evacuation, any major incident, spillage or overflow of flammable liquids, spill or leak of unfamiliar or unknown chemicals, accident involving extremely hazardous substance, maybe a fire that is posing levee threat in a storage tank. To our last one, level 3. Level 3 requires resources from state agencies, federal agencies, or private industries. Know that level 3 requires a unified command, most serious of all hazardous material incidents. Large-scale evacuation may be required. Incident will most likely not be concluded by any one agency. So this is going to require effort from several resources, maybe also bringing in specialists from industries or governmental agencies. Some of these specialists may be out of state that they had to bring in. Sophisticated sampling and monitoring equipment. Could be a decontamination on a large scale. So some of the level 3 incidents could be an evacuation extending across jurisdictional boundaries, beyond the capabilities, local hazmat response teams, and you have to activate the federal response plan. Okay. I'm on page 1233, operational strategies, hazmat incidents. You're going to need to know these strategies. Strategies are divided into 3 options that relate to the modes. These are the modes of operation. You're either going to be non-intervention, which means do nothing, defensive, which would be at an operational level, or offensive, which would be at a technician level. Non-intervention allows the incident to run its course. Every incident, pretty much, will eventually run its course. Some may take longer than others. It's just the amount of property damage, environmental damage, all those things, human life, whatever, could take place if you do nothing. But there are some incidents that you would actually sit back and let it run its course. Most incidents we will get involved with, and that kind of gets us into, are we going to be defensive, which pertains to confinement. Now remember, confinement means keeping it in an area of a hazard, of a given area. That's where we can either use our diking techniques, which is our underflow, or diking techniques, which is on land, and our damming techniques, which would be our underflow, overflows in water. Offensive, this would be more into containment, keeping it in its container, plugging, patching, those sort of things. Now that is, offensive is a technician, more technician level, so that's going to be another step up above your operational level whenever you finish this course. Section of strategic mode is based on risk to the responders, the level of training, the balance between resources required and available resources. Safety of the first responders is utmost consideration when selecting the mode of operation. Mode of operation may change during the course of the incident. Also, how we're going to come up with that mode of operation is risk versus benefit. If there is no benefit and there is a very high risk, then we may go to non-intervention. But if there is going to be some risk and there's going to be definitely some benefit to this, then we'll adjust accordingly, whether we're just going to be defensive. And of course, the most risk we're going to take would be if we go offensive. All right, non-intervention. You need to know that this is responders that take no direct actions on the actual problem. Only safe strategy in many types of incidents. Best strategy in certain types of incidents when mitigation is failing or otherwise impossible. First responders should take the following actions. So that's something you might do, is withdraw to a safe distance. Remember we talked about a BLEVE. Definitely you may be a mile or more away from that particular tank if you suspect a BLEVE. Report the scene conditions from telecommunications center. Initiate an incident management system. Call for additional resources, isolate the area, and maybe just beginning evacuations. Defense. Defensive strategies. This is more of an operational level. Responders seek to confine the emergency to an area without directly contacting the hazardous material involved. Defensive mode is selected when one of the following circumstances exists. The faculty may call for it based on a pre-incident evaluation. Responders have training, equipment necessary to confine the incident to an area of origin. Operations level, first responders should take the following actions. Report the scene conditions to the telecommunications center. Remember, telecommunications center is a dispatch. Initiate an incident management system. Call for additional resources as needed. Isolate the area. Establish your control zones. Begin evacuation. Protect exposures. Evaluate and report the incident progress. Offense. Offense responders take aggressive direct action on the material, the container, or process equipment involved in the incident. Operations may result in contact. This is being contact with the material and require responders to wear the appropriate chemical protective clothing and respiratory protection. Some offensive operations are beyond the scope of the responsibilities of the first responders, conducted more highly trained hazardous material personnel. Okay, page 1235, planning the initial response. Once the incident analysis is underway and there is a basic understanding of hazards and products involved, the incident commander must use that information to plan a response. Delivering a successful and safe outcome means thinking the situation through and developing a solid strategy with realistic response objectives. Okay. Using a response model can simplify the problem-solving process because most response models incorporate an entire problem-solving process. So we need to know these right here. We definitely need to look at this. We need to know about using the response model and how it can simplify the problem-solving and information. We're going to be using information gathering, processing or planning stage, implementation or output stage, review or evaluation stage. Many models from which to choose. Most models move through each basic stage in problem-solving decision-making. Remember a PI. That was something that we went over in the very first chapter. You're going to need to know it again. Simple response model containing the basic four-step problem-solving process model. So you need to know APIE is analyze, plan, implement, and evaluate. Risk-based response uses information, science, and technology to mitigate a hazardous material incident. Key to risk-based response: equip responders with critical information needed to make good decisions. Do not overwhelm them with nice-to-know information. So remember, give us critical information and leave the rest out. Product identification. Vital element in successful mitigation of a hazmat incident may not always be possible. Should be implemented for all hazardous material incidents. Hierarchy of decisions needed to protect the responder. Okay, this is going to start with the thorough size up identifying immediate hazards so that decisions can be made in a logical, educated manner. Time may not be wasted attempting to research that property. While size-ups help with prediction, it is detection and monitoring equipment that will help protect the responders. Know that. Quick, effective way to thin slice information, make educated, life-saving decisions. I'm just making sure I went through everything. Just going back, just remember all hazards response or all hazardous materials incidents. That's some of the risk-based response information that we go through. Developing an incident action plan, critical to rapid, effective control of emergency operations. It's a well thought out, organized course of events developed to address all phases of the incident control with a specified time. Okay, we need to know that. Time frame specified allows the least negative action to continue. Written incident action plans. Know this, a written incident action plan may not be necessary for a short-term routine operations. Let's say we have a structure fire, contents only, room and contents, mattress fire, and that's not going to require us to have a written incident action plan. But let's say we have a large scale hazardous material incident or something of that nature, where you may, because of the amount of time, you may be transferring different incident commanders, or because of the amount of time and how many people are operating on the scene, you definitely will need a written incident action plan for a large-scale incident, but not always necessary for a short-term routine incident. So large-scale complex incidents, it's going to require a written incident action plan. Action planning starts with identifying the response objective, which is the strategy to achieve a solution to the confronted problems. The response objective, broad in nature, defines what has to be done. Once the strategy is defined, the command staff needs to select the action options, which are the tactics, to achieve the objective. The action options are measurable in time and performance. So what we need to back up and remember that planning starts with an objective. Our response objective is going to start with a strategy. Strategy is going to be your goal. Once we've defined the strategy, know that the next thing will be selecting the tactics that are done, the objectives. So we have a goal and then we have our objectives. So remember strategies, then tactics. Remember that. The IAP provides for necessary support resources such as water control, utility control. The incident action plan ties either problem-solving process together by stating what the analysis has found, what the plan is, and how it shall be safely implemented. Once a plan is established and resources are committed, it is necessary to assess all its effectiveness. Know that we always have a continuous size of problem or process. Elements of the incident action plan include strategies, incident objectives, current situation, resources assigned, accomplishments, hazardous statement, risk assessment, protective measures, medical plan, communications plan. All of those things get involved with our incident action plan. All personnel must function according to the incident action plan. Company officers or sector officers should follow predetermined procedures. All first responders should be familiar with the concept of the incident action plan. And we definitely need to know that first responders that are assuming the role of incident commander will need to develop the incident action plan. So it doesn't matter if it's a firefighter 2, firefighter captain, firefighter battalion chief, does not matter. The first responder that assumes the incident command role will need to develop and implement an incident action plan. Common response objectives and actions. Once first responders have a basic understanding of the problem, they can begin to plan their solution by establishing response objectives, which are the strategies. You need to know that. Response objectives is the strategies, and you need to know that the action options, according to this text, is the tactics. Response objective strategies, action options are the tactics. Okay, now with those response objectives, you must know broad statements of what must be done to resolve the incident. The action options are specific operations that must be done in order to accomplish those goals. Okay. Other way of putting it, those A was the response objectives are the strategies, and the action options are the objectives. Risk-based response objectives must be selected based on their ability to be achieved, prevent further injuries, minimize the environmental and property damage with the constraints of safety, time, equipment, and personnel. Now I'm going to move down a little bit. Making the right strategic decision at a hazmat incident is critical because of the variety of developments that can occur. Poorly developed decision-making process can lead to greater problems. Common response objectives at a hazardous material incident: isolation, notification, identification, rescue, spill control, leak control. Those are all going to be common response objectives. The IC can set whether objective they deem appropriate using what other terms they prefer. Okay, so we need to back up and we just need to know some of these common response objectives at a hazardous material incident. So some of the ones I definitely want you to know is isolation. First thing you do, you get on scene. Isolation. Second, notification. Third, identification. Make sure you know those three. Also, is it spill control, leak control, and here's a big one right here, crime scene and evidence preservation. That is definitely a common response objective. Is this a crime scene? Some response objectives may not be needed if the hazard is not present. Some goals may require specialized resources. Others may require a large percent of available resources that ability to complete other objectives might be compromised. Action options. Action options, which would be more like tactics. Specific tactics used to accomplish response objectives. So the action options are basically accomplishing your response objectives. Tasks that responder will be asked to perform in order to mitigate the incident. That's going to be, some of the things could be responders must be able to use the SOP and other resources to determine the correct PPE. PPE requirements, that's going to be depending on the mission, the product involved, and the circumstances of the incident. All right, page 1238, implementing response objectives and action options. We must know that the purpose of the incident action plan is to develop the necessary strategy and tactics to affect a positive and safe outcome. Positive and safe outcome. Okay, so we need to know tactics, develop once the strategies are in place. Once you have your tactics, then your task. The last part is the task. You have your strategy, tactics, then the task. And the tasks are basically the boots on the ground doing the work. So operational tasks are used to accomplish the strategy, should be measurable in both time and performance, evaluate and ensure that they will meet the strategic goals that were put into place. Page 1241, control zones, hazard control zones. Remember, circular in shape, provide scene control required at a hazmat and terrorist incidents. This is what's going to prevent interference by unauthorized persons, help regulate first responders to movements within the zones, and minimize contamination. That's a key. Minimize contamination from exposed or potentially exposed victims. So make sure you know that. It can also help ensure accountability of all personnel. It's divided into levels of the hazard of the incident. The shape, we already mentioned, circular in shape. These are sometimes called scene control zones. Different agencies may have different control zone needs. Definitely any incident that is involving a crime, law enforcement is designated to a zone just for the crime scene. Incidents involving bombs. Examples where traditional control zones and operations that are usually conducted within those zones may vary. Just remember, we do set up, if there is a bomb involved, there is an initial isolation distance that we're going to be setting up, and definitely law enforcement would be involved. And that's going to definitely require a larger hot zone. Again, we're talking about any sort of incident revolving bombs. Responder may need to conduct operations in an area designated as the hot zone. It could be triage, treatment, transportation. Know this, that in the event, if the event has multiple devices or release points, unique to terrorist events, and may require a non-traditional scene management plan. You may have one, maybe more than one hot zone. So if you have multiple devices, you may have more than one hot zone. It is necessary for the incident commander to remain flexible, establish a scene management plan and control zones to meet the needs of all of the responders to the incident. Responders must be aware of control zones as they are established. One of those, rule of thumb, if there's one device, Always prepare for a secondary device. It may be a second one. So let's go through these zones real quick. Hot zone. Hot zone, you definitely need to know that the hot zone could also be called the exclusion zone. So it may not always be listed as a hot zone. It could be, if it says exclusion zone, that is the hot zone. You need to know that is the area surrounding an incident that is potentially dangerous, either because it presents a threat in the form of a hazardous material or the effects of the area can be contaminated by chemical warfare agents, can have potential to become a contaminant by released or hazardous material, could be exposed to the gases, vapors, mist, dust, or runoff of the material. Here's the key thing, hot zone. Responders must have proper training and wear appropriate PPE to work in the hot zone. Warm zone. Warm zone is also called contamination reduction zone or corridor. Decontamination. So remember, the warm zone, it butts right up against the hot zone. As soon as you come out of the hot zone at a hazmat incident, you enter the warm zone, you enter decon, which is also called the contamination reduction zone or corridor. It is adjoining the hot zone, serves as a buffer between the hot and cold zone. So you got the hot zone where the hazard is, warm zone where decontamination is set up, and then you have the cold zone where it could be extra personnel staging and the incident commander. Decontamination usually takes place within the corridor. You need to know that. At incidents involving crime, parts of the warm zone may be part of a crime scene, and responders should create minimum disturbance. PPE normally be required in the zone, although in some circumstances it may be at a reduced level. So, rule of thumb for the warm zone, for decon, and at an operations level, you can do decontamination. Rule of thumb is, if an individual, and we'll get into this next chapter as far as our level of clothing and protective gear, if an individual is in the highest level, which would be called a level A vapor protective suit, and they're going into the hot zone in a level A, rule of thumb is decon can be in a level B, which is a splash protective suit, but they'll still be wearing an SCBA. So what I'm getting at, rule of thumb, one level less than what the hot zone requires. Unless you're monitoring the air continuously, that may say that you can go to a level C, which is actually an APR, which is a respirator. So it just depends on by what you're monitoring, what the chemical is, and the air monitoring, what level of clothing. But when in doubt, rule of thumb is one level below, and it's possible, if you really don't know what you're dealing with, you could just go level A and just be done with it. Cold zone, also called the support zone. Understand that. Cold zone, support zone, surrounds the warm zone. This is where logistical support is. Workers in the cold zone are not required to wear PPE because it should be considered safe. Are we still monitoring the air in the cold zone? Yes. Some personnel may still be wearing PPE in case of a secondary device, so it just depends on the situation. The cold zone, what you'll find in the cold zone. The command post, a staging area, backup teams, logistical support, criminal investigation teams, could be triage treatment, transportation areas. Those are some things that you might find in the cold zone. Staging, different levels of staging. There's staging, the more common of staging is it's going to be a unit that is ready to be operated. They just haven't been given a task. So it's like an engine company on standby, and all they're waiting on is for the incident commander to give them a task, so they are staging. Staging needs to be located in an isolated spot, so you don't want multiple units all crowding the scene. So you're definitely going to want levels of staging. So your first level of staging would be close to the incident, but maybe not in the cold zone itself. So it's going to be an isolated spot in a safe area. And that's going to be where occupants can interfere with ongoing operations. Minimizes confusion, and here's the big word, minimizes freelancing. We tend to want to get involved into the incident besides just staging, but when we're talking about accountability and we're talking about tasks that are being performed, the incident commander, the last thing they want are units basically freelancing, going into the incident and kind of doing whatever they want to do without having an assignment. So we don't work without an assignment. So if you show up on scene and the incident commander gives you the command and goes, look, I need you to stage at this point, that means just be ready to go when they call for you. Don't take it upon yourself to, hey, let's go help out. Your job is to stage at that point. Staging areas should be located in spots in the cold zone where occupants cannot interfere with ongoing operations, a safe direction of travel. Ideally, the emergency responders and equipment at terrorist incidents should be staged between multiple locations in case the staging areas are attacked. So know that. Terrorist incident, you may have multiple staging areas. Protection of responders. First priority at any incident. Know that. First priority at any incident is the protection of the responders. Injured or incapacitated responders are unable to assist in mitigation efforts to protect the public. We're there to help solve the problem. If we're getting injured, now you have less personnel that were dispatched to help solve this problem, mitigate this incident. Measures to protect responders, staying uphill, upstream, upwind, having on the appropriate PPE, using time distance shielding as protection, decontaminating responders, tracking and identifying all personnel working at the incident, having a safety officer, just knowing that wearing PPE, responders must wear the appropriate PPE. Accountability systems. All personnel and equipment assigned to the incident must be tracked via an accountability system. Know that. Most units responding to an incident arrive fully staffed and are ready to be assigned. To handle these and other differences in the available resources, the incident action plan must contain a tracking and accountability system that has the following elements. So we need to know some of these elements. We need to know that some of these elements are a procedure for checking in at the scene. So when we arrive on scene, whether we just over the radio, we check in on the scene and the incident commander writes that down, or we actually walk up to a command post and check in on scene. Also know this, the way of identifying and tracking the location of each unit and all personnel on scene, and also that's coming on scene, procedure for releasing personnel. So make sure you know those. Buddy system. I'm on page 1246, the buddy system. And backup personnel, RIT teams. NFPA and OSHA mandate the use of buddy systems and backup personnel hazmat incidents. Work groups contain at least, know this, contain at least 2 members, so nobody works alone. 2 members, nobody works alone. Know that the primary benefit, know this, provide rapid help if there's an emergency. If one person becomes incapacitated, the other can call for help and provide immediate assistance. The backup personnel must be placed and prepared to enter the hot zone with appropriate equipment and provide assistance or rescue if necessary. Now also know this, your RIT team, know this, must be dressed in the same level of personal protective clothing as the entry personnel, the hot zone personnel. So if your hot zone personnel go in a level A vapor protective suit, then the RIT team must be in a vapor protective suit to go in case there's an emergency. Time, distance, and shielding. We need to know these. Effective strategy to protect responders at all hazmat incidents. You need to know that. And that's where we use time, distance, and shielding. Real quick, time, limiting the time which responders are exposed to reduce, that's going to help to reduce hazards and hazardous material, the likelihood that they would suffer serious harm. Distance, maximizing the distance for potential hazards to often prevent or reduce harm. And then shielding, a physical barrier. Shielding would be a physical barrier between the responder and the hazard. We mentioned this back in the last chapter when we were talking about radiation. Evacuation, escape procedures. Always know that you know this. You must have a signaling system should be used that will advise personnel inside the danger area when to evacuate. Now, whether that's built into your air packs, whether it's your radio, certain communication commands that you give them, could be as simple as blowing air horns. Have some way to let your personnel know when to evacuate. Okay, other communication methods in the event of an emergency. You need to know this. Other communication methods in the event of an emergency can include portable radios, voice, hand signals, and use of other predetermined signals. Hand signals are very important so that even the players that are in the hot zone are given hand signals. You know, just a simple thumbs up, everything's okay. I'm out of air. I'm out of air. Tapping on their helmet, I don't feel good, I've got a problem. Those little things like that can be something that's very simple, but can be very useful at a hazardous material incident. So hand signals. Know these right here. These are some signals, and you're going to need to know the use of designated signals and their meanings. Cease operations. Cease operations. One long blast, 3 seconds. One long blast, 3 seconds. Cease operations. 3 short blast. Evacuate the area. 1 long and 1 short blast. Resume operations. Make sure you know those. Protection of the public. See how many minutes I've gone here. Oh, I'm at 37. I'm going to do... tell you what we're going to do. This is going to be part 2. I'm already at 37 minutes again. So I'm going to stop right here. We still have about one more session. So I'm going to take a little break. We're going to stop here at another 37 minutes. So see you back in a minute.